Commander Danny Reyes stood on the bridge of the carrier ship Endurance and watched the stars blur past the viewport. They were traveling faster than the ship was designed to go. The engines screamed in protest. Warning lights flashed on every console. But Danny did not care about any of that. He cared about getting to HFY in time. "How long until we arrive?" he asked. Lieutenant Katie Marsh looked up from her console. She was young, barely 30 years old, but she was the best tactical officer Danny had ever worked with. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her green eyes were tired from lack of sleep. 14 hours at current speed, she said. "But sir, if we keep pushing the engines like this, we might not have ships left to fight with. The Valorians might not have a planet left if we slow down." Katie nodded. She understood. They all understood. Danny turned and looked at his bridge crew. These were good people. Sergeant Ben Cortez sat at the weapons station, his large hands moving steadily across the controls. He was a veteran of 3 wars and had more scars than Danny could count. Corporal Lisa Monroe coordinated communications with the rest of the fleet. She was calm and efficient, never raising her voice, even in the worst situations. Pilot Jake Sullivan sat at the helm, guiding the Endurance through the darkness of space with steady hands. They had all volunteered for this mission. They had all known what they were getting into. Behind the Endurance, 46 other ships followed. Destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and transports filled with soldiers. It was not a large fleet by galactic standards. Some of the great empires had thousands of warships. The Scathrin had millions. But these were human ships, crewed by human men and women who had chosen to fight. "Sir," Katie said, "we're receiving updated intelligence on the Scathrin fleet. The numbers are not good." "Show me." The main screen lit up with tactical data. Danny studied it in silence. 312 Scathrin warships surrounded HFY. Most were standard battlecruisers, but there were also 20 dreadnoughts, massive ships capable of destroying entire cities with a single shot. And at the center of the formation sat the flagship of Warlord Zithrax, a ship so large it was almost a small moon. 6-to-1 odds, Katie said quietly. Maybe 7-to-1 when you factor in their dreadnoughts. "I've had worse odds," Danny said. It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it made them feel better. The door to the bridge opened, and Captain Claire Bennett walked in. She commanded the destroyer Relentless, one of the fastest ships in the fleet. She had come aboard the Endurance for the final briefing. Claire was Danny's age, with short blonde hair and a face that showed the strain of command. Her brother Kyle had wanted to come on this mission, but Danny had ordered him to stay on Earth. Someone had to speak for the fleet if they did not return. "The other captains are ready for the briefing," Claire said. Danny nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Faces appeared on screens around the bridge. Captains and commanders from every ship in the fleet, all waiting to hear the plan. "I won't lie to you," Danny began. "The odds are against us. The Scathrin have more ships, more firepower, and more experience. By every calculation, we should lose this battle." He paused and looked at the faces on the screens. No one flinched. No one looked away. "But we're not fighting to win," he continued. "We're fighting to save lives. Every minute we keep the Scathrin busy is another minute for civilians to reach safety. Every ship we destroy is one less ship bombing cities. We just have to hurt them badly enough that they think twice before attacking anyone else." Captain Marcus Cole, commander of the fighter wing, spoke up. "What's the plan, sir?" "We hit them hard and fast. No defensive formations, no careful tactics. We go straight at them, and we don't stop. The Scathrin have never faced an enemy that doesn't retreat. They don't know how to fight someone who isn't afraid to die." Claire stepped forward. "The Relentless will lead the first attack. We'll draw fire and create an opening for the boarding teams." "Boarding teams?" Marcus asked, surprised. "We're going to board their ships?" We are, Danny said. The Scathrin are strong, but they've never fought humans hand to hand. Our soldiers are training right now for close combat. We're going to get onto their ships and tear them apart from the inside. Ben Cortez grinned at the weapons station. He had spent his whole career fighting in tight spaces. This was exactly the kind of battle he was made for. What about the transports? Lisa Monroe asked. We have 20,000 soldiers ready for ground deployment. Once we punch a hole in their blockade, Danny said, the transports will head for the planet. Ground Commander Nathan Price will lead the invasion. His job is to protect civilians and hold key positions until we can break the Scathrin fleet. Danny looked at the screen showing Kethvar. Even from here, he could see the fires burning on the surface. I won't order any of you to do this, he said. If anyone wants to turn back, I understand. This is not our world. These are not our people. We have no obligation to die here. The bridge was silent. Then Claire Bennett spoke. Sir, with all respect, shut up. We didn't come this far to turn back. A ripple of laughter ran through the fleet communication. Danny smiled. All right then. We arrive in 14 hours. Get your crews ready. Check your weapons. Say your prayers if you have them. And remember why we're here. Somewhere on that planet, innocent people are dying. They called for help, and no one answered except us. We're going to show them what that means. He ended the communication and turned back to the viewport. The stars continued to blur past. In the Scathrin flagship, Warlord Zithrax received a report about the approaching human fleet. He read the numbers twice, certain there was an error. 47 ships, coming to challenge his armada? The Scathrin had conquered over 100 worlds. They had destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. They had never lost a war. And now this insignificant species, these humans, thought they could challenge the Dominion? Zithrax felt his mandibles click together in what passed for laughter among his kind. He had heard stories about humans. They were emotional creatures, ruled by feelings rather than logic. They were short-lived and fragile. They broke easily. He ordered his fleet to ignore the approaching ships. They were not worth the effort. The bombardment of Kethvar would continue as planned. It was a decision he would regret for the rest of his very short life. The humans were coming, and they were going to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethvar system. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the alarms started. Contact, Katie Marsh called out. Multiple contacts. Scathrin ships at bearing 270. They're moving to intercept. Commander Danny Reyes gripped the arms of his chair. Through the viewport he could see the planet in the distance, a gray and brown ball covered with smoke and fire. Around it, like flies on a corpse, the Scathrin fleet waited. All ships, battle stations, Danny ordered. This is it, people. No turning back now. Across the fleet, men and women ran to their posts. Weapons were loaded. Shields were raised. Pilots climbed into their fighters. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone was afraid. But they moved anyway, because that was what they had trained to do. A group of 50 warships broke off from the main fleet and moved toward the humans. They expected this to be easy. They expected the humans to run. They were wrong. Relentless, you're up, Danny said into the communication system. Captain Claire Bennett's voice came back strong and clear. Copy that, Endurance. Relentless moving to engage. The destroyer shot forward, its engines burning bright against the darkness. Behind it, a dozen human ships followed in attack formation. They headed straight toward the Scathrin interceptors without slowing down. On the Scathrin lead ship, the captain watched the approaching vessels with confusion. What were these humans doing? Any sensible species would spread out, find defensive positions, try to use tactics and strategy. But the humans were charging directly at them, like animals, rushing toward their own deaths. The Scathrin opened fire. Plasma beams cut through space. The lead human ship, a small frigate called the Valor, took a direct hit. Its shields failed instantly. Fire erupted from its hull. But the Valor did not stop. It kept coming, engines still burning, weapons still firing. It crashed into the Scathrin ship at full speed, and both vessels exploded in a ball of fire. The Scathrin captain barely had time to process what had happened before more human ships reached his formation. They did not fight like anything he had seen before. They got close, too close, so close that the Scathrin's long-range weapons were useless. And then they fired everything they had. Claire Bennett guided the Relentless through the chaos. Her ship took hit after hit, but she kept pushing forward. Her weapons crew fired without pause, targeting engines and weapon systems, crippling enemy ships so they could not fight. "Launch boarding pods," she ordered. 20 small craft shot out from the Relentless and latched onto a nearby Scathrin cruiser. Inside each pod were 5 human soldiers in heavy armor. Sergeant Ben Cortez was in the first pod to breach the hull. His team cut through the metal and dropped into the dark interior of the alien ship. The Scathrin crew turned to face them, their black eyes wide with shock. They had never been boarded before. They did not know how to respond. Ben and his team did not give them time to figure it out. Human weapons roared in the tight corridors. The Scathrin were larger and stronger, but the humans were faster, and they were not afraid. They pushed deeper into the ship, fighting for every meter, until they reached the engine room. "Charges set," Ben reported. "We're moving to extraction." The team fell back to their pod and detached from the cruiser. Moments later, the ship exploded from within. On the bridge of the Endurance, Danny watched the battle unfold. His ships were taking heavy damage. He had already lost 6 vessels, but the Scathrin had lost 23. "Sir, their dreadnoughts are moving," Katie reported. "They're coming to support the interceptors." Danny nodded. He had expected this. "Signal the fighter wing. Tell Marcus it's time." Lieutenant Marcus Cole led his fighters through the heart of the battle. His wing consisted of 60 small craft, fast and hard to hit. They wove through the Scathrin formation, dodging plasma fire, and headed straight for the approaching dreadnoughts. "All fighters, target their sensor arrays," Marcus ordered. "Blind them." The dreadnoughts were massive, but their sensors were vulnerable. The human fighters swarmed around them, firing at specific points that Marcus had identified during his weeks of studying enemy ships. One by one, the dreadnoughts lost their ability to see. A blinded dreadnought was still dangerous, but it could not aim properly. Its shots went wild, sometimes hitting its own allied ships. Chaos spread through the Scathrin formation. Chancellor Mirith watched the battle from her bunker on the planet's surface. She could not believe what she was seeing. The human ships were being destroyed, yes, but they were taking Scathrin vessels with them at an impossible rate. For every human ship that fell, 2 or 3 enemy ships went down as well. "How are they doing this?" she whispered. Tef stood beside her, equally amazed. "They do not fight to survive," he said slowly. "They fight to hurt. Every action they take is designed to cause maximum damage, even if it costs them everything." That is madness. But it is working. In space, the battle reached its peak. A human cruiser named the Defiant lost all power after taking multiple hits. It drifted toward the Scathrin flagship, seemingly helpless. Warlord Zithrax ordered his ships to ignore it and focus on the active threats. But the Defiant was not helpless. Its crew had rerouted all remaining power to one system, the main cannon. Captain Amy Ruiz, bleeding from a wound on her head, stood at the firing controls herself. "For Earth," she said, and pulled the trigger. The shot pierced the shields of the Scathrin flagship and struck its port engine. The massive ship shuddered and slowed. It was not destroyed, but it was wounded. Zithrax roared in fury. He had never been hit before. His flagship had never taken damage. He ordered every ship in his fleet to destroy the Defiant. The cruiser vanished in a storm of plasma fire, taking all hands with it. But by then the human transports had slipped through the gap in the blockade. 20 ships full of soldiers were heading for the planet's surface, protected by the sacrifice of their comrades. Transport fleet has cleared the blockade, Katie reported. Ground forces will reach the surface in 15 minutes. Danny closed his eyes for a moment. So many dead already. So many more would die before this was over. But the mission was still possible. They could still save the Valorians. All remaining ships, form up around the transports, he ordered. Protect them at all costs. Nothing gets through. The human fleet, battered and broken but still fighting, moved to shield the descending soldiers. Above them, the Scathrin regrouped and prepared for another assault. The battle was far from over, but something had changed. For the first time in centuries, the Scathrin were not winning easily. For the first time, they had met an enemy that would not surrender. And on the surface of HFY, billions of Valorians looked up at the burning sky and dared to hope. The transport ships descended through fire and smoke. Scathrin anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with plasma, but the human pilots did not turn back. They flew low and fast, using the ruined buildings of HFY as cover. Ground Commander Nathan Price stood in the lead transport, surrounded by his soldiers. They were the best Earth had to offer. Marines, Special Forces, veterans of a dozen conflicts. They had trained for months to fight the Scathrin. Now they would find out if that training was enough. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Nathan looked at his troops. Young faces and old, men and women, all of them scared, but all of them ready. He thought about what to say to them. Something inspiring, something that would make them feel brave. But these were soldiers. They did not need pretty words. You know the mission, Nathan said. Protect civilians. Kill the enemy. Don't die if you can help it. Let's move. The transport hit the ground hard. The doors opened, and the soldiers poured out into hell. The capital city of HFY had been beautiful once. Now it was a graveyard. Buildings lay in ruins. Streets were filled with bodies. Fires burned everywhere. And through the smoke, the Scathrin marched, hunting down the last survivors. Sergeant Amy Ruiz led her squad toward the nearest shelter entrance. Her intelligence said there were thousands of Valorians hiding underground, and a group of Scathrin was trying to break through the doors. She saw them before they saw her. 6 tall creatures, their black armor gleaming in the firelight. They had plasma sights in their hands, weapons that could cut through steel like paper. They were drilling into the shelter door, getting closer to the people inside. Contact, Amy whispered. 6 hostiles. Standard formation. Her squad spread out. Private Tony Medina took position on the left. Corporal Hannah Webb moved to the right. The others formed a firing line behind a collapsed wall. On my mark, Amy said. 3, 2, 1, fire. Human rifles roared. The Scathrin were tough, but they were not prepared for the attack. 3 of them fell in the first burst. The other 3 turned, their mandibles clicking in surprise. They charged. Amy had never seen anything move so fast. The lead Scathrin crossed the distance between them in seconds, its scythe raised to strike. She rolled to the side as the blade came down, missing her by inches. She fired her pistol at point-blank range, putting 3 rounds into its head. The creature fell, but another was already there, swinging at Corporal Webb. The soldier ducked, but the scythe caught her shoulder, cutting deep. She screamed and went down. Tony Medina tackled the Scathrin from behind. He was half its size, but he hit it with everything he had. The creature stumbled, and Tony shoved a grenade into the gap in its armor. He pushed himself away just before it exploded. The last Scathrin tried to run. Amy shot it in the back. Webb, how bad? Amy asked, kneeling beside her wounded soldier. I'll live, Hannah said through gritted teeth. Go help the others. I can wait. Amy nodded and led her remaining squad toward the shelter doors. She pounded on the metal and shouted in the Valorian language she had learned during training. We are friends. We are here to help. Open the doors. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the doors began to open. A Valorian face appeared in the gap, 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "You are the humans?" "Yes, we're here to protect you. Stay inside and stay quiet. We'll handle the rest." The Valorian stared at her. Then, to Amy's surprise, he began to cry. "We thought no one would come. We thought we were alone." "You're not alone anymore," Amy told him. "Not as long as we're breathing." Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers fought their way through the ruins, engaging Scathran forces wherever they found them. The battles were brutal. The Scathran were stronger, and their weapons were more advanced. But the humans had something the aliens did not understand. They refused to give up. Corporal Pete Dawson found himself alone at a bridge crossing. His squad had been scattered by an ambush. Enemy forces were trying to cross the bridge to reach a refugee camp on the other side. If they got through, thousands would die. Pete set up behind a destroyed vehicle and started shooting. The Scathran came in waves, 5 at first, then 10, then more. Pete fired until his rifle overheated. When that ran out of ammunition, he picked up a Scathran weapon from a fallen enemy and kept fighting. Hours passed. The sun moved across the smoky sky. Pete took wounds to his arm, his leg, his side. But every time the Scathran tried to cross that bridge, he was there to stop them. Eventually, another human squad found him. He was sitting with his back against the burned vehicle, barely conscious, surrounded by the bodies of over 40 enemy soldiers. "Medic," the squad leader shouted. "Get this man some help." Pete looked up with tired eyes. Did they get through?" "No, soldier, they didn't. You held them." Pete smiled and passed out. In the Central District, medic Nicole Grant ran through a field hospital that had been set up in a bombed-out building. Wounded Valorians filled every available space. They had strange bodies, different organs, blood that was the wrong color. But Nicole had studied their biology. She knew how to help them. She moved from patient to patient, stopping bleeding, setting bones, giving injections. She had been awake for 26 hours, and her hands were shaking with exhaustion. But she kept going. Every life she saved was a victory. A Valorian child grabbed her sleeve as she passed. The small creature looked up at her with 4 frightened eyes. "Are you going to die too?" the child asked. Nicole knelt down and tried to smile. "Not today, little one. I have too much work to do." Commander Nathan Price coordinated the defense from a makeshift command center. Reports came in from across the city. Human casualties were mounting. The Scathran were adapting to their tactics, but they were holding. Somehow, against all odds, they were holding. Then a new report came in that made his blood run cold. "Commander, we have enemy armor approaching the main shelter complex. 20 heavy vehicles, accompanied by at least 200 infantry. The main shelter complex held over 1 million refugees. If the Scathran reached it, the slaughter would be unimaginable." "Do we have anything that can stop them?" Nathan asked. His aide shook his head. "We're stretched too thin. The only unit close enough is Vance's squad, but they only have 8 soldiers. Nathan closed his eyes. 8 soldiers against 20 tanks and 200 enemy troops. It was suicide. "Get me Vance," he said. Private Leo Vance came on the line, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Commander, I see them coming. What are your orders?" "Leo, I need you to hold them. I need you to buy time until reinforcements arrive." There was a pause. When Leo spoke again, his voice was steady. "Understood, Commander. We'll hold them." "Leo, you know what I'm asking you to do." "Yes, sir, I do." "It's been an honor, Commander." The line went dead. Leo gathered his squad and explained the situation. None of them hesitated. They took up positions in the path of the advancing enemy and prepared to make their stand. When the Scathran tanks came, Leo's squad opened fire. They destroyed 2 vehicles before the enemy realized what was happening. Then the return fire started, and Leo watched his soldiers fall one by one. In the end, only he was left. He was wounded in a dozen places. His weapon was empty, but he still had one thing. He'd pulled out his radio and called for an airstrike on his position. The bombs fell. The explosion lit up the sky. When the smoke cleared, Leo Vance was gone. So were the tanks. So were the 200 enemy soldiers. The shelter complex was saved. Nathan Price heard the report and bowed his head. 8 soldiers had given their lives to save 1 million people they had never met. That was the kind of species humans were, and the galaxy would never forget it. The battle for Kethvar lasted 9 days. 9 days of constant fighting in space and on the ground. 9 days of explosions, screams, and death. 9 days that changed the galaxy forever. On the final day, Commander Danny Reyes led a boarding party onto the Scathrin flagship. His ship, the Endurance, was barely functional. Most of his fleet was destroyed. But they had done the impossible. They had broken the Scathrin blockade. Now there was only one thing left to do. The corridors of the enemy flagship were dark and filled with smoke. Danny moved forward with what remained of his team. Katie Marsh was beside him, her arm in a makeshift sling. Ben Cortez limped on a wounded leg, but still held his rifle steady. A dozen other soldiers followed, all of them injured, all of them exhausted, none of them willing to stop. They fought their way through deck after deck. The Scathrin defenders were fierce, but they were confused and disorganized. They had never imagined that their flagship could be invaded. They had never prepared for this possibility. The humans had prepared for nothing else. Finally, Danny's team reached the command center. The great doors stood before them, sealed and reinforced. Ben stepped forward with an explosive charge. "Last one," he said. "Make it count." The blast tore the doors from their hinges. Danny was the first through, his weapon raised. Warlord Zithrax stood in the center of the room. He was huge, nearly 9 feet tall, his black armor scarred from the battle. His guards lay dead around him, killed by the shaking and explosions that had rocked the ship. He held a plasma scythe in his clawed hands, its blade glowing red. "So," he said, his voice deep and cold, "you are the humans." "Yes," Danny replied, "and you are done." Zithrax made a sound that might have been laughter. "You have cost me many ships, many soldiers, but you have not won. Even if you kill me, the Dominion will send another fleet, and another. You cannot stop us. You are just one small species among thousands." "Maybe," Danny said, "but we stopped you. That's enough for today." The warlord attacked. He was fast, faster than any creature Danny had ever faced. The plasma scythe cut through the air, missing Danny by inches. He fired his weapon, but the shots bounced off the alien's armor. Katie opened fire from the side. Ben threw himself at the warlord's legs. The other soldiers attacked from every direction. They were outmatched, outclassed, but they kept fighting. Zithrax killed 2 of them with a single swing. He threw Ben across the room. He struck Katie with his armored fists, sending her crashing into a wall. One by one the humans fell, but they had weakened him. His armor was cracked. His movements were slower. Danny was the last one standing. He had his rifle. His pistol was empty. All he had was a combat knife. The same knife his father had carried in a war on Earth decades ago. Zithrax loomed over him, scythe raised for the killing blow. "You fought well," the warlord admitted, "for a primitive species. But it ends here." Danny looked up at the alien towering above him. He thought about Earth. He thought about his family. He thought about all the soldiers who had died to get him to this moment. "You're right," he said. "It does end here." He threw the knife. It was not a powerful throw. It was not elegant or skilled, but it flew straight and true, and it found the gap in the warlord's cracked armor. Zithrax staggered. His scythe fell from his hands. He looked down at the small blade sticking out of his chest, then back at the human who had thrown it. "Impossible," he whispered. "We get that a lot," Danny said. The warlord of the Scathran Dominion fell. He did not get up. When the news spread that Zithrax was dead, the remaining Scathran forces collapsed. Ships that had been fighting moments before suddenly retreated. Ground forces abandoned their positions and fled. Without their leader, the Dominion's army lost its will to fight. The battle for HFY was over. Of the 47 human ships that had arrived, only 12 remained capable of flight. Over 60,000 human soldiers had died on the planet and in space. They were buried on HFY, in soil that was not theirs, under skies that were not their own. Chancellor Mireth stood at the burial ceremony, surrounded by billions of Valorians who had survived because of human sacrifice. She watched as human flags were placed over rows of graves that stretched to the horizon. She did not have words for what she felt. No Valorian did. When the ceremony ended, she found a human marine sitting alone near one of the graves. He was young, his face still marked with dirt and dried blood. A bandage covered a wound on his forehead. He held a photograph of a woman and 2 small children. "May I sit with you?" Mireth asked. The Marine nodded. His name tag said Ortega. "This is your family?" she asked, looking at the photograph. "Yes. Back on Earth. My wife Maria. My kids, Joey and little Anna." He smiled sadly. "I promised them I'd come home." "You still might." "Maybe." He looked at the grave in front of him. "Tommy didn't. He was my best friend. We grew up together, joined the service together. He died holding a bridge so that refugees could escape." Mireth was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the humans first arrived. "Why did you come? Your world is safe. The Scathran were no threat to you. You could have stayed home with your families. Why did you cross the stars to die for people you never met?" Sam Ortega looked at her with tired eyes. He thought about the question for a long time. "Because someone had to," he finally said. "Because you were suffering and no one else would help. Because if we turned away and let innocent people die when we could have done something, we wouldn't be able to live with ourselves." He paused. "That's what it means to be human, I guess. We can't ignore people in pain. Even strangers, even aliens. It's just not in us." Mireth did not fully understand. Her people were kind, but they were also practical. They would not have crossed the galaxy for strangers. They would have calculated the risks and made the logical choice. But these humans did not think that way. They felt something when they saw suffering, something so strong that it overcame logic and self-interest. And that feeling had driven them to do the impossible. 1 year later, Ambassador Kyle Bennett stood before the Galactic Assembly. His sister Claire had died in the battle, and not a day passed that he did not think of her. But he had a job to do, and he would do it. The assembly chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. All of them were watching the human with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "We are not the strongest species in this galaxy," Kyle began. "We are not the oldest or the wisest. Our ships are crude. Our technology is primitive by your standards. We have only been in space for 1,000 years, a blink of an eye compared to some of you." He paused and looked around the chamber. "But we will always answer when someone calls for help. It does not matter if they are far away. It does not matter if we cannot win. It does not matter if we have nothing to gain. When innocent people suffer, we come. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human." The chamber was silent. "The Scathran thought we were weak," Kyle continued. "They dismissed us as primitive and irrelevant. They learned otherwise. Any species that thinks they can harm innocent people without consequence will learn the same lesson. He stood straight and tall, his voice ringing through the chamber. "We are not conquerors. We do not seek territory or power or wealth. We just want to live in peace and help others do the same. But if you bring war to the innocent, we will come for you, and we will not stop until the job is done." The Galactic Assembly had existed for millions of years. In all that time, they had heard countless speeches from countless species, but none had ever spoken like this. When Kyle finished, there was silence. Then slowly, the Valorian delegation began to applaud. Soon, the entire chamber was filled with the sound of approval. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds that had suffered under Scathran rule, people began to rise up. They had heard about what happened at HFY. They had heard about the species that had charged into impossible odds to save strangers. And they knew that if they fought hard enough, if they held on long enough, the humans would come. Within a year, the Scathran Dominion collapsed. Within a decade, humanity had become the most respected species in the galaxy. Not because they were powerful, because they cared. And in the end, that made all the difference. The sky had not been blue for many days now. Chancellor Mireth stood at the window of her war chamber and looked up at the darkness that covered her world. The twin suns of HFY were hidden behind thousands of black ships. The Scathran had come, and they had brought death with them. Mireth was old by her people's standards. She had lived for nearly 400 years and had seen many things. She had seen her civilization grow from simple farmers to builders of great cities. She had seen her people reach for the stars and join the Galactic Assembly. She had believed that the universe was a place of wonder and peace. She had been wrong. The Scathran Dominion had arrived 3 galactic cycles ago. Their ships had appeared without warning at the edge of the system. At first, the Valorians had tried to communicate. They had sent messages of peace and friendship. The Scathran had responded by destroying the first colony world. Now, after 3 cycles of fighting, the war was over. The Valorians had lost. A young officer named Teth ran into the war chamber. His blue skin was pale with fear, and his 4 eyes were wide. He held a data tablet in his shaking hands. "Chancellor," he said, his voice breaking, "the northern shields have fallen. The Scathran ground forces are moving into the capital region." Mireth closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared herself for it. But now that it was here, she felt nothing but tired sadness. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked. "None, Chancellor. The last of our fleet was destroyed this morning. Admiral Korth went down with his flagship." Korth had been a good friend. Mireth remembered when he was just a young pilot, full of hope and dreams. Now he was gone, like so many others. "And the shelters?" she asked. "Filled," Tech said. "Billions of our people are underground. But the Scathran have started drilling. They will reach the shelters within days." Mireth turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see fires burning. The great library of HFY, which had stood for 10,000 years, was nothing but ash now. The gardens where children had once played were craters filled with the bodies of the dead. "Have we received any response to our distress calls?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Teth looked down at his tablet. "The Galactic Assembly has sent their regrets. The Torvani Empire says they cannot risk war with the Scathran. The Malorian Collective has offered to take refugees, but they have no ships to send. So we are alone." "Yes, Chancellor, we are alone." The galaxy was full of civilizations that spoke of peace and cooperation. But when the Scathran came, those same civilizations had looked away. They had calculated the risks and decided that the Valorians were not worth saving. She could not blame them. The Scathrin had conquered over 100 worlds. Their armies were endless, their weapons were terrible. No species had ever defeated them in battle. To fight the Scathrin was to die. And so the galaxy watched and did nothing while the Valorians burned. "There is one more thing, Chancellor," Teth said quietly. Mirith turned to look at him. There was something strange in his voice, something that sounded almost like hope. "We received a transmission from an unknown region of space. It came from the Outer Rim, from a sector we have never explored." "Who sent it?" Teth looked at his tablet again. "A species called humans. They are from a small planet called Earth." She had heard of humans. They were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. The Galactic Assembly considered them primitive and unimportant. They had crude ships and simple weapons. They were not members of the Assembly and had no real presence in galactic affairs. "What did they say?" she asked. Teth read from the tablet. "The message says, 'Hold on, we are coming.'" Mirith stared at him for a long moment. Then she let out a small, sad laugh. "Humans," she said. "They send us a message of hope when they have no power to help. Their fleet is tiny. Their technology is generations behind ours. What do they think they can do against the Scathrin?" "I do not know, Chancellor. But the message came with coordinates. They say they will arrive within 2 days." 2 days. We may not survive 2 more hours. Teth nodded. He understood the truth as well as she did. The humans were too few, too weak, and too far away. Their message was meaningless, but still, Mirith found herself thinking about it. In all the responses they had received from the galaxy, not one species had offered to fight. Not one had said they were coming. The great empires, the ancient civilizations, the powerful federations, they had all turned away. And yet these humans, these primitive creatures from a small blue world, had chosen to come. It was foolish, it was hopeless, but there was something in their simple message that touched her old heart. "Send them a response," she said quietly. "Tell them we are grateful for their words. Tell them that if they truly wish to help, they should turn back. There is no point in dying for a world that is already lost." Teth began to type the message, but before he could finish, another alert sounded on his tablet. "Chancellor," he said, his voice trembling, "the Scathrin have begun their final assault. They are attacking all remaining positions at once." Through the window, Mirith saw the sky fill with enemy ships. Explosions lit up the darkness as the last defenses fell. The ground shook as bombs struck the city. She placed her hand on the cold glass and watched her world die. Somewhere far away, across the endless void of space, a human fleet was coming. But they would be too late. By the time they arrived, there would be nothing left to save. Or so she believed. Chancellor Mirith did not know humans. She did not understand what drove them. She could not imagine a species that would cross the stars to fight a battle they could not win, simply because someone needed help. She would learn soon enough. The galaxy had dismissed humans as primitive. They had ignored them as unimportant. They had assumed that such a young and fragile species had nothing to offer. They were all about to discover how wrong they were. In the darkness of space, 47 human warships pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Their crews worked without sleep. Their commanders studied every piece of information they had about the Scathrin. They knew the odds. They knew they would probably die. They came anyway, because that is what humans do.